The lunchtime crowd filtered into Le Mistral, the upscale restaurant nestled on the corner of 5th and Ashbury, where elegance lingered in the air like expensive perfume. The host was still arranging menus when the front doors flung open with a breeze of entitlement. 4 women strutted in, each dressed to the nines, their stilettos clicking like punctuation marks on marble floors. Pamela Radcliffe led the charge, her silver-streaked hair swept into a tight chignon, her sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown. Behind her came Clarice, slender and sharp as a stiletto, then Brenda, loud and always half a second behind, and finally Marla, the youngest, the one who tried too hard to be cruel enough to belong. They barely glanced at the host. "The table by the window," Pamela commanded, not requested. "And tell your staff to wipe it down properly. Last time there were crumbs." The host, used to this kind of clientele, simply nodded and gestured them toward the corner table, the one with views of the city skyline and the boutique shops across the street. As the women settled into their plush chairs, removing coats and flinging designer bags across the remaining space, Ava approached with the calm professionalism of someone who had already seen too much for one morning. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice light but confident. "My name is Ava. I'll be taking care of you today." Pamela barely glanced at her. "You look familiar. Were you the one who spilled water on Mrs. Dalloway last month?" "No, ma'am," Ava replied evenly. "That wasn't me." "Well," Clarice said, flipping open the menu like it insulted her, "let's hope you can manage a glass of wine without causing a scene. We have delicate fabrics. Would you like to hear today's specials?" Ava offered, undeterred. Brenda snorted. "Just bring us something decent. Not the cheap house wine." "We'll start with a bottle of the Pinot Noir Reserve," Pamela said sharply, not looking up. "If you can handle that." Ava paused briefly, eyes calm. "Excellent choice. The Reserve is full-bodied with notes of cherry and cedar. I'll bring it right out." She turned on her heel, spine straight, head high. Behind her, one of the women whispered loud enough to be heard. "You'd think with a job like this she'd at least try to hide the attitude." "Oh please," Clarice chimed in. "Half of these girls barely finished high school. Probably got the job through some diversity program." They cackled. Ava heard every word, but she didn't flinch. She had learned a long time ago how to read between the lines, how to walk through fire without showing the burn. In the kitchen, she took a breath, counted to 10, and poured the wine without trembling. The restaurant was buzzing with clinks of cutlery, low conversations, and the distant hum of jazz. She could have been anywhere else, at a desk, in a courtroom, maybe at a law firm where her name would sit on the door in gold letters. But for now, she was here. By the time she returned to the table with the bottle, the women had already moved on to louder, nastier banter. "Honestly," said Marla, sipping water through a straw she refused to touch, "I don't understand how people choose to do jobs like this. I'd rather die than spend my life asking people if they want dressing on the side." "Some people don't have the luxury of options," Clarice said smugly. "Though it's not like they work hard enough to earn them either." Ava said nothing as she opened the bottle with expert grace. She poured each glass precisely, gently tilting the bottle to avoid a single drop. "Well," Pamela said, watching Ava with narrowed eyes, "at least you're good with your hands." Ava finally looked at her, a slow, deliberate smile blooming across her face. "Thank you, ma'am. I suppose all the practice from preparing legal briefs paid off." Pamela blinked. "I beg your pardon." But Ava only smiled again. "Enjoy the wine. Your appetizers will be right out." She walked away without another word, leaving behind 4 women who, for the first time that afternoon, had nothing to say. The silence at the table didn't last long. Pamela swirled the wine in her glass, staring at Ava's retreating figure with narrowed eyes. Did she just say legal briefs? What is that supposed to mean? Brenda laughed, flicking her perfectly manicured nails against the crystal stem. "Please. Probably took a paralegal course online and thinks she's the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I doubt she even knows who that is," Clarice added, smirking. "This is what happens when you give people delusions of grandeur. Working in a restaurant doesn't make you sophisticated." "She's got a mouth on her. I'll say that," Pamela muttered. "I don't like it." Marla leaned forward, whispering conspiratorially. "I think I've seen her before. Not here, somewhere else. Maybe in a magazine? Or one of those local news segments where they profile inspiring young people or whatever." Clarice scoffed. "Inspiring? Really, Marla. Don't embarrass yourself. Back in the kitchen, Ava leaned against the counter for a moment, her fingers gently resting on the silver tray holding their appetizers, goat cheese tartlets and truffle risotto bites. She inhaled slowly, refocusing. The comments didn't bother her anymore. Not really. They were like a bitter wind, cold and sharp, but unable to touch what was deep beneath the surface. She wasn't here for them. She was here because her mother's health had taken a turn last fall, and medical bills had stacked faster than any scholarship could cover. She had taken leave from her firm with the promise she'd return, and she would. But right now, being close to home, bringing an income however she could, mattered more than prestige. Still, there were days like today when it stung. Ava carried the tray out with a light step, balancing everything with the elegance of a ballet dancer. When she arrived at the table, the laughter stopped again. "Here we are," she said, placing the dishes with care. "Truffle risotto bites, served warm, and goat cheese tartlets on crostini. Let me know if you need anything else." "I'd ask you what wine pairs with this," Pamela said, arching an eyebrow, "but I'm sure you'd find some clever legal metaphor for that too." Ava smiled, just faintly. "Actually, truffle pairs beautifully with Pinot Noir. Earthy complements earthy, much like truth complements justice." That earned her a long look from Clarice, who tilted her head. "You certainly know how to talk like you've been somewhere." "I have," Ava said simply. "But I don't expect everyone to recognize the journey." Pamela bristled. "Is that supposed to mean something?" "No," Ava replied, her tone still pleasant. "It's just that sometimes, the people you overlook are the ones who've already stood in rooms you've never imagined." She didn't wait for their response. She turned and glided away, once again leaving them in stunned silence. Clarice leaned across the table, her voice low. "Okay, who is she?" Brenda pulled out her phone, glancing around guiltily before tapping in a quick search. "I mean, we could just, check." Pamela frowned. "That's unnecessary. She's clearly just putting on airs. These people think one certificate from a night class makes them experts." "No, wait," Brenda said, squinting. "Hold on. Ava Sinclair. Harvard Law. Valedictorian. Spoke at the Women in Justice Summit last year. Holy hell. What?" Clarice leaned over her shoulder. "That can't be the same person." Brenda turned the screen around. There, in a photo taken at a sleek conference hall, was Ava smiling, confident, a microphone in hand as she stood between two Supreme Court justices. Her hair was styled, her expression fierce. The caption read, "Rising Voice in Civil Rights Law. Ava Sinclair addresses Harvard's next generation." Marla blinked. I knew I recognized her. Pamela stared at the screen, then glanced back toward the server's station, where Ava was calmly speaking to the chef, her expression unreadable. "I don't understand," Pamela muttered. "Why would someone like her be here?" Clarice's lips twisted. "Probably just trying to play the martyr card. Makes her feel noble." Brenda shook her head slowly. "Or maybe she just has a reason we wouldn't understand." "She could be doing anything," Marla said, all creeping into her voice. "And she's serving us appetizers." Pamela sat back in her chair, eyes dark. "Well, I don't care how many degrees she has. If she thinks she can humiliate me in my restaurant." "It's not your restaurant," Clarice cut in. "And I don't think she's trying to humiliate anyone. I think she's just smarter than us." That comment earned a sharp silence from the table, one that stretched awkwardly, uncomfortably, across the white linen and the untouched tartlets. At the server's station, Ava refilled her tray with grace, her back straight. She didn't need them to apologize. She didn't need them to understand. But something told her that, for once, they just might. The atmosphere at the corner table had shifted. The women who once laughed freely now toyed with their silverware, casting occasional glances toward Ava as she worked the room with quiet efficiency. Her every movement seemed amplified now, each step, each polite nod, each scribble in her notepad a reminder that the assumptions they'd made were embarrassingly off-mark. Pamela sat rigid, her chin held high, but the slight twitch in her jaw betrayed her discomfort. Clarice broke the silence. "Well, it's not like a law degree guarantees manners." "She didn't do anything rude," Marla said, softer than before. "She just made a point." Pamela's fork clinked too hard against her plate. "She's a waitress, Marla. I don't care where she went to school. She serves food for a living. There's a difference between being smart and knowing your place." Across the room, Ava noticed the sudden hush. She could feel the shift without hearing a word. Years of courtroom observation and debate prep had sharpened her instincts. The room, once full of clatter and comfort, now felt like a stage, and she was the topic of someone else's whispered dialogue. As she picked up their entree plates, roasted duck with orange glaze, sea bass with fennel, sous chef Emilio raised an eyebrow. "You okay out there?" he asked, quietly. Ava offered a soft smile. "They're just not used to being wrong. You sure you want to serve them the main course? I can get Brian to take it." "No need," she said. "Sometimes letting people sit in their own discomfort is better than any lecture." Emilio chuckled and handed over the plates. "You're something else, Ava." She returned to the table with the same graceful calm that had both irritated and intrigued the women. As she placed each dish with care, Brenda attempted to lighten the mood. "This sea bass looks amazing," she said brightly, though the tightness in her voice gave her away. "Do you, know much about cooking?" Ava looked at her, smiled. "Enough to know fennel is tricky. Too much and it dominates the dish. Too little and it gets lost entirely. Balance is everything." Marla perked up. "That's like law, isn't it? Finding the balance between arguments." Ava paused. Her eyes met Marla's, and for a brief second, something passed between them, acknowledgement, perhaps. Then she nodded. "Exactly. It's all about the weight you give things." Clarice groaned quietly and reached for her wine. "Are we seriously doing this?" Pamela leaned in toward Ava, her voice low. "Why are you here? Really? Are you trying to make some point? Play some social experiment on us?" Ava didn't react right away. She finished placing the last dish, then straightened, holding Pamela's gaze. "I'm here," she said, calmly, "because sometimes life requires sacrifice. Because degrees don't cancel out humanity. And because helping my mother through her illness is more important than what anyone assumes about me." A beat passed. Ava didn't flinch. She didn't falter. Then she added, "And if being here reminds someone not to measure worth by uniforms or menus, then I suppose that's just a bonus." Pamela looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. "You could have just said you needed the money," she snapped. Ava gave a polite nod. "I didn't think I needed to explain." Then she walked away again, back straight, the tray against her hip like a badge. At the table, Marla shifted in her seat. "She's impressive," she said under her breath. "She's arrogant," Clarice corrected. "Just in a quiet, righteous way." Brenda chewed slowly, then added, "I still can't believe we didn't recognize her. That panel she was on? I watched it. She spoke about housing rights and criminal reform. She was incredible. And now she's here, serving us." "She didn't mention any of that until you provoked her," Marla pointed out. Pamela's face darkened. "Enough. I'm not going to sit here and be shamed for ordering lunch." "No one's shaming you," Brenda said carefully. "She didn't do anything to us. We did something to her. We just didn't know it." Clarice rolled her eyes. "Here we go. Saint Ava the server." "You know what?" Marla said suddenly. "Maybe we should invite her to sit. Just for a minute." Pamela looked horrified. "Absolutely not." But Brenda seemed to be considering it. "Why not? Aren't you curious?" Pamela stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. "I need air. The smell of smugness is suffocating." She strode off toward the restroom, her heels echoing in the suddenly quiet room. The remaining women sat in awkward silence, chewing more slowly now, unsure whether to continue the meal or the conversation. Meanwhile, Ava stood near the bar, watching without watching. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply waited for the moment to pass and for what would come next. Ava folded a clean napkin with practiced ease, but her mind was already 3 steps ahead. Pamela's retreat had created a crack in the table's polished facade, small, but visible. Ava had seen it happen before, in law school debates and courtroom internships, the moment when posturing gave way to uncertainty. It was never loud. It was quiet and irreversible. From the bar, she could see the remaining women exchanging glances, trying to recalibrate the unspoken hierarchy now that their queen bee had stormed off. Brenda stirred her wine, her brow furrowed. "You think she heard me mention the panel?" she whispered to Marla. "She heard everything," Marla said, watching Ava carefully. "She has courtroom ears." Clarice huffed. "Well, good for her. But what kind of person gets into Harvard Law and ends up bussing tables? I mean, no offense, but something doesn't add up." Marla turned, irritated. "You heard her. Her mother's sick. People make sacrifices." Clarice smirked. "People also make mistakes." Just then, Ava approached, this time holding a small tray of amuse-bouches, house-made goat cheese with fig jam and microgreens on crostini. Complimentary, courtesy of the chef, but Ava knew what it looked like. An olive branch. She set the tray down with care, her voice calm as ever. "Chef Emilio asked me to bring this over. He thought you might appreciate a palate cleanser." Brenda glanced at the plate, then up at Ava. Thank you. And, listen, I just wanted to say. No need, Ava interrupted gently. Really? Brenda hesitated. It's just. I didn't expect today to be a reminder that I've been blind to certain things. Ava raised an eyebrow, just slightly. Blindness isn't the problem. Choosing to stay blind is. Brenda nodded slowly, the weight of the words settling. From across the restaurant, Pamela returned, heels clicking like punctuation against the marble floor. Her makeup was flawless, but something in her eyes looked unsettled. She sat down without a word, reaching for her glass of water. Are we done playing hero worship? She asked, ice dripping from her voice. No one answered. Pamela sighed loudly. You know what this is, right? It's performance. It's a flex. A power move. She gets to sit on her little throne of moral superiority while pretending she's above us. Ava hadn't left yet. She stood still, her hands gently clasped in front of her, gaze fixed but not confrontational. I'm not above anyone, she said evenly. But I'm also not beneath you. Pamela blinked. The room seemed to hold its breath. I do this job because I have to, Ava continued. Because when your mother needs you, titles don't matter. But I don't pretend it's not hard. What I don't do is let it define me. Clarice scoffed under her breath, but even she was starting to look less sure of herself. You don't have to like me, Ava added. But don't mistake kindness for weakness, or silence for ignorance. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving the table once again steeped in silence. Pamela gritted her teeth. Can you believe this? No one responded. Even Clarice, who could always be counted on for backup, was suddenly busy with her fork. The lunch dragged on, tension thick and inescapable. The food, though expertly prepared, sat mostly untouched. Conversation dried up, replaced by forced chewing and sidelong glances. In the back of the restaurant, Ava paused at the kitchen door, exhaling slowly. Brian, another server, leaned in. You okay? She nodded. It's not about them. They're rattled. Especially the blonde one. They should be. But it's not about revenge, Brian. It's about truth. He gave her a thumbs up and turned to grab his next tray. Well, whatever it is, you're handling it like a boss. Ava allowed herself the smallest smile. Back at the table, Pamela had reached her boiling point. I'm not staying for dessert, she said, standing abruptly. Suit yourself, Marla muttered. You're making it worse. Pamela looked at her like she didn't recognize her. Excuse me. You heard me. Maybe it's time you ask why her presence bothers you so much. What, exactly, are you threatened by? Clarice raised an eyebrow, intrigued now by the sudden turn. Pamela shook her head, grabbed her bag, and left without another word. Ava watched her go but didn't react. Some battles win themselves. The next hour in the restaurant passed like a slow exhale. The sunlight that once poured through the tall windows now cast long, slanted shadows across the elegant floor. At table 14, the laughter had vanished. What remained were fragments, clinking forks, hesitant glances, and the quiet reckoning that comes after a performance is called out for what it is. Clarice pushed her salad around with the edge of her fork. Brenda sipped her wine slowly, gaze lowered. Only Marla seemed genuinely contemplative, her fingers gently tapping the stem of her glass. When Ava approached again, it wasn't with plates or menus. It was with the check, folded crisply in a black leather wallet. She placed it down gently, standing a little taller than before, not out of arrogance, but because something had shifted. Whenever you're ready, she said, offering them a polite, professional smile. Clarice frowned. That's it. You're not going to rub it in? No dramatic monologue? Ava tilted her head. This isn't a courtroom. You don't need to be humiliated to learn something. Sometimes silence is the lesson. Brenda leaned forward. You really are her, aren't you? The Ava James who argued in that education equality case. Ava paused. She hadn't expected someone to recognize her by name. But then again, she hadn't expected any of this today. I was on the panel, Ava confirmed softly. We won that one. But it's not about me, it's about the kids we fought for. Marla exhaled, finally putting words to what had been weighing on her. You were brilliant. I watched the whole debate. And I remember thinking, why don't more people like her make the news? Ava offered a soft smile. Because people like me usually have more work than spotlight. And sometimes, that work starts with waiting tables. Clarice crossed her arms, still uneasy. But if you're so brilliant, why be here? You could be on the bench, or a professor. You could be anywhere. Ava looked at her, unshaken. You think intelligence exempts us from hardship? I'm not here because I failed. I'm here because I chose my mother over ambition. Because someone had to sit by her hospital bed, explain her meds, advocate for her care. And because this job, she gestured around, lets me pay her bills while still being near. The words weren't angry. They were grounded in truth. And truth, when spoken plainly, didn't need embellishment. Clarice blinked, suddenly unable to meet Ava's eyes. Brenda, on the other hand, looked moved. She raised someone extraordinary. Ava smiled, gently. She raised someone resilient. There's a difference. Just then, Emilio, the head chef, peeked out from the kitchen, giving Ava a subtle nod of encouragement. He had seen the exchange from afar, sensed the storm and the calm that followed. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Ava gathered their empty plates, her hands steady, her steps deliberate. As she turned away, Marla spoke again. Would you ever consider going back to law? Ava paused, then looked over her shoulder. I never left. I just took a different route. There was something in her voice, final, but hopeful. Like someone who'd been knocked off course but had found meaning in the detour. Back at the table, the women sat in silence. She changed the entire energy in here, Brenda finally said, watching Ava move through the restaurant with grace. She did more with 10 sentences than most people do in 10 years. Clarice muttered, you sound like a fan club. Brenda didn't flinch. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending we know everything about people based on what they wear or where they work. Marla pulled out her card and placed it in the check wallet. I think we just learned more from a waitress than from our entire brunch conversation. As Ava returned to process the payment, Brenda glanced at the card machine, then looked up at her. Would you ever consider doing a panel again? Or speaking to students? My niece is at Columbia. She's pre-law, and she's always looking for role models. Ava's eyebrows lifted just slightly. That depends. Would she listen to someone who still smells like Table 11's truffle fries? Brenda laughed, shaking her head. She'd be honored. Ava tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Tell her to find me online. I'll send her a few reading lists. The check paid, Ava handed back the receipt with a small, courteous bow of her head. Have a lovely afternoon. As the women got up to leave, Clarice lingered behind. She looked at Ava, her expression softer than it had been all day. You're not what I expected. Ava smiled, not unkindly. Few people are. The restaurant quieted after the brunch crowd cleared. The clatter of plates replaced by the soft hum of conversations and the occasional ding from the kitchen. Ava stood near the bar, wiping down a tray, lost in thought. She hadn't come in today expecting to give a speech. She hadn't planned on revealing her background, or her mother's illness, or why she was here instead of in a courtroom. But life had its way of calling on you, when you least expected it, and exactly when you were needed. Emilio approached with a grin and a raised eyebrow. You always keep secrets like that in your apron pocket? Ava smirked, shaking her head. I didn't plan to say anything, but they poked the bear. You were a lion, not a bear, he said. And you did it with class. No shouting. No insults. Just truth. She nodded. It's what the law teaches you. Let the facts speak louder than emotion. Emilio leaned against the counter. They left a good tip. Even Clarice. Ava raised a brow. Pity money? Respect money, he corrected. That's not the kind of guilt that comes with a $20 bill. They left you a note, too. He handed her a folded napkin, neatly written in blue ink. Ava hesitated, then opened it. Thank you for the lesson. You made me see something in myself I didn't like. I'm going to work on that. Marla. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. For all the cruelty, for all the assumptions those women had carried in with their designer purses, one of them had walked out with something else. Growth. Later, as the afternoon sun poured golden light over the sidewalk, Ava stepped outside for a break. She stood under the awning, eyes closed, letting the warmth touch her face. Spring was beginning to wake up the city. A voice interrupted her peace. Excuse me, Miss James? She opened her eyes and turned. A young woman stood there, maybe 19 or 20, nervously clutching a notebook. Her dark curls framed a curious, eager face. Yes, Ava said kindly. I saw you inside earlier. I was waiting for my order and overheard what you said. I hope that's okay. I recognized you from the education law panel on YouTube. You were incredible. Ava was slightly stunned. Thank you. That was a long time ago. The girl stepped forward. I'm a first year at Columbia. Pre-law. Honestly, I've been doubting myself lately, thinking maybe I'm not cut out for this. But watching you today, it reminded me why I started. Ava's heart swelled with a quiet pride. What's your name? Naomi. Naomi Davis. Ava extended her hand. Well, Naomi, I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Naomi grinned. Do you ever mentor students? I'd love to learn from someone like you. Ava paused for only a second before answering. I wasn't planning to, but maybe it's time I started. They exchanged contacts, and as Naomi walked away with her takeout bag and a spark of purpose in her stride, Ava felt something shift within her. The waitress apron didn't define her. The law degree didn't, either. What defined her was what she chose to do with both. Back inside, Ava clocked out. As she grabbed her coat from the staff room, she noticed her reflection in the small mirror above the lockers. She didn't see a server. She didn't even see a lawyer. She saw a woman holding her ground with quiet strength. On her way out, Emilio called after her. Taking tomorrow off? I think so, she said. I've got a call to make. Someone at the Legal Aid Society has been after me to join a task force. I've been putting it off. Emilio nodded. Go change the world. We'll keep the truffle fries warm. She laughed, grateful. As she stepped onto the sidewalk and began walking toward the train station, Ava felt the weight of assumptions peel away like old wallpaper. Her mother was stable now, recovering. The bills weren't gone, but they were manageable. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to return to the fight she was born to lead. Behind her, the restaurant door closed with a soft chime. In front of her, the city pulsed with noise and motion. She didn't walk fast. She didn't need to. The world could wait. Because the next time they underestimated her, they wouldn't get a monologue. They'd get the whole truth. And that would be more than enough.